of struggling? Are you tired of dealing with the chaos that is around you because you've fallen into temptation? James says the first thing you have to understand is you look in the mirror, that's the guy, that's the woman that's at the fault of temptation. It is a personal struggle. And the struggle is, it's always there. There's no false sense of security. There's another passage where the Apostle Paul, who wrote in 1 Corinthians 10:12, he says, don't think you are standing firm. Be careful that you don't fall. And that was the idea that don't get overconfident in your spirituality. Don't get overconfident in that you have somehow overcome or you're no longer susceptible to temptation. It is a constant, lifetime struggle. And then the last phrase there I want you to understand, to pervert our natural desires. Now this is very important. Now the qualifier there, evil desires, the word evil actually isn't in the original language. It's just the word desires. And evil is put there in English so we can have a context, so we understand that what James is speaking. Maybe we might miss it since we don't read the original language. So evil desire is added there as sort of a notation, a little explanation there, and it's an accurate one because he's speaking about desires that have gone from being natural and normal to evil. That is, they're used in a way that are destructive. They're used in a way outside of God's intention and design. Okay, now we can just do a few basic ones. Let's start with a really easy one, okay? A very easy one is food. We all have to eat. Everybody knows that. And most of us only go just a little bit without being reminded that I have to eat. Some of you are thinking, please don't preach too long because I have to eat, okay? There's just this, it's always there. We know it. And very few of us have gone more than a day ever without it, and some certainly not by voluntary means. Is it good to eat food? Is it natural? Is it appropriate? Yes. Is it good to steal because you don't have food to eat? Okay, now, despite what somebody in a university ivory tower might say, they have a relativistic point of view, you know, the Bible makes it clear there are no exceptions. Stealing is wrong. And there's other means to go about getting food. Stealing's not one of them. Okay, there's an easy one. You agree? How about this? Just because you have to eat, you need to eat, does that mean you should stuff yourself every time you eat? No, okay? Gluttony is still wrong. It's destructive to the body. It's destructive to testimony. It is against what God designed. God did not make you and design you and intend for you to stuff yourself at every meal. Is eating good? Can it become gluttonous? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, another easy one. Here's a very easy one. Rest. We all need to rest. You agree? Most of us probably need 7 or 8 hours. Some of you get by on 5 or 6. Some of you push it up there a little bit longer. But all of us need rest. If you go more than a few days without sleeping, you will just self-destruct, if not die. It's very hazardous to go without rest. We all agree. But does that mean you should sleep 10 or 12 hours a day? And then when you finally roll out of bed, lay on the couch and start flipping channels. And do that not one day a week, day after day. Laziness, slothfulness is still a sin. It's wrong. Some of us are susceptible to that. We need rest, yes, but we exaggerate. Okay, now here's the big one. We all knew we were going to get the big slugger up to the plate. Okay, sexuality. Okay, it's kind of one of those words everybody gets a little uncomfortable when we talk about sexuality. We actually do need it. We have natural biological urges. It is essential for the survival of the human race. Okay, sexuality, it's a good thing. That's how we got here. But sex is one of those destructive things that gets right outside of God's boundaries, and it causes all kinds of problems. Relationship problems, trust issues, not to mention health issues with disease, and just all kinds of destructive and sometimes even violent outcomes by misusing and abusing what is a natural, God-given desire. And so the temptation is always for us to take something that is good and push it outside of God's boundaries, and in that moment, as it's been described here, it becomes evil. It becomes counterproductive. It becomes destructive both to ourselves and to others. It's a perversion. Now, what I want you to notice about this, if you just want to maybe write it by your Bible or write in the blank or put in a parentheses, all of this is at the emotional level. Can you see that? Desires are reactive. They're responsive. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to do this wrong, and this wrong. It starts with something that is emotional, something that is desirous inside. It's an urge. It's something that's below or even deeper than the cognitive mental level. It's something that comes up from within. It's an emotional base level. It's a longing. It could even be subconscious. Now, what we need to understand that this push, that whether it's from Satan or outside forces or whatever it is, that pushes us outside of those boundaries, that temptation is not a sin. At this point, it is something that is common. It is something you will experience by the end of the day at least. It is something you will definitely experience tomorrow. It is something that is a common part of your past history. The temptation is something that you will and do face. Jesus faced it, as I've already stated. It is not a sin to be tempted. But that is where it starts, and we have to understand where it starts. We need to understand fully sin in order we can know how to combat it and how to deal with the temptation. Now, when we move to the next point, number 2, this is where we really begin to understand how temptation develops, the process. And James gets clear here when we jump into verse 14. Now, when we come into letter number 2, not just the source of temptation, we understand it's personal. It's at our very deepest emotional, desirous levels. Those natural desires, but they want to go crazy. They want to overflow God's intended boundaries. Now we understand steps how it develops. Now, if we've made it clear already that it's coming, be ready. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 11, he says, we are not unaware of his schemes. That is, we have an enemy, we have an evil one who is a part of this process. So it's understanding, being aware of how it works. All right, let's look at verse 14, and we'll go back into 15. Oh, there goes my phone. All right, verse 14. But each one of us is tempted when by his own evil desires, there's that personal, emotive, deep level, he is dragged away and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Now there's 3 parts here. Again, the desire is there. It's always going to be there. It's natural. It's something that can be contained. It can be used for good purposes, but it has a tendency to go bad. And here's the 3 ways it goes. First of all, letter A is that we are deceived. This is a deception. Deception. And deception is that we are allured by the improper enticement of a desire, the improper fulfillment of a desire. Now we've gone from this emotional, natural level, and something starts to happen now in our mind. So if you're taking notes, or if you like to sort of keep the continuity going, if you think of you're moving to emotions, now moving to something in your mind, to your intellect, and I put mind there as a reminder, this deception. And there's 2 phrases that we see there. It uses very colorful language. It's the words dragged away and enticed. Now, both of these are very similar, but they sort of speak of 2 different perspectives. Dragged away is a hunter's term. And it's someone who does a trap, who lays wait, who sets up, and they overcome their predatory. And there are emotions, there are temptations that ravage our mind like a predator. And some of you, maybe if you've even succumbed to these temptations, or you've just been so overwhelmed, sometimes it's been just a driving lust. Someone of the opposite sex who's given you a lot of attention, or someone from the opposite sex that you find very desirable, and that just begins to overwhelm your mind like a predator that attacks you. Now, sometimes with some of us, it can be a rage that just overtakes us. You can't help it. Something happens, or someone says something, and next thing you know, you're boiling over with uncontrollable rage. That's that idea of being dragged away by those forces that are very strong and very powerful. He says sometimes, though, it's much more subtle. Sometimes it's an enticement. It's something that looks small and innocent, but it's gradual and it grows. Sometimes it's just a flirting glance. Sometimes it's a lingering thought. Sometimes it's a fantasizing of revenge, of hurting someone or saying something, or it's a plan or a scheme that begins by maybe taking a little bit and then planning to do and to hurt and to take more and more. And it's this enticement. Now that word there is a fisherman's term. It's a term of a lure. And what is interesting about the lure here is that it has something that disguises the trap. It disguises that which is going to grab. And it has that idea of bait. And the bait and the lure that's set on there. Now here's what we need to understand about our enemy and about our own